The Rebbe wrote thousands of letters, many thousands. 30,000 letters have been published so far. This is aside for the tens of thousands of answers when people would call in for blessing or advice, and he would circle the answer and write a line or two. But here we have full-length answers to scholars, to lay people, to all sorts of communal issues and personal issues. So the former chief rabbi, the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, once said, I tell people studying to be rabbis that if you want to know how to paskin, how to establish Jewish law, you have to read the code of Jewish law. If you want to know how to deal with people's problems, you have to go through the Rebbe's letters. Because the Rebbe's letters dealt with issues of religion, faith, crisis, loneliness, all the different issues, science, whatever it may have been, and to give one an insight in how to deal with others, and from a Torah perspective, to bring the light to the most mundane thing. So first, I want to begin with a somewhat of a quote from Hillel. Hillel says, do not separate from the community. Al tifrosh min hatzibur. Community is valuable. And then we have another famous quote of Hillel's. If I am not for myself, who is for me? If I'm just for myself, money, what am I? So we have here a beginning of a dichotomy between individual and community. And there's a necessity seemingly for both. But we'll take a look at some of the secular approaches that blossomed, and how Judaism throughout the ages looked at state versus individual. And that will help us have a greater understanding of the Jewish perspective as well. The Mishnah tells us, it says that when Cain killed Abel, your brother's bloods are crying out to me from the ground. And why did it say bloods, plural? And one interpretation the Mishnah brings down and says is if you kill one person, it's like you killed the entire world. Cain wiped out 25% of the world's population of the time. So he killed one person. All those children and grandchildren that were to be, he also killed. So we have a quote in the Mishnah. Therefore, humanity was created alone. Humanity, he's created singular. It is true he's created as a male-female hybrid, according to the Midrash, or according to the other readings, initially as the male and the females from the rib. The first reading would say from the side, that they are a male and female entity, that they are split aside. But we see from here, why were they created singular? Because whoever destroys a single soul is like you destroy a world. And if you save a life, it's like you preserve the world. And another reason is, for the sake of peace, no one should say, my father was greater than your father. We all had one father. Why didn't God make a bunch of creations? And the answer is, no one should say, oh, my race is better. Imagine what it would have been if we didn't come from one. We still managed to put each other down. We all have one father, and that was to avoid it. There are a whole bunch of midrashim that deal with why God created man in such a way, in such a place, and each one is to, make him more humble and make him better. But each one we somehow manage to circumvent God's intention. But that's the idea. Another idea, the heretics should not say there are many powers in heaven. If humanity reflects God, so if there are many different origin stories of a different human being, they might think they're more than one God. And then another idea, to tell the greatness of God, blessed be He, that when you mint a coin, every coin is exactly the same. God takes the exact same human being and mints many coins, and each person is different. And one should not say and the same thing is similar to with a fellow. So every person has to say, for my sake, the world was created. Vishvili nivra olam. You are a complete world. So the idea of individualism is paramount in Judaism. Seemingly, the idea that you are the center of the universe, you have responsibility, the individual is sacrosanct. So this is one approach that we have in Judaism. On the other hand, when the Torah is given, it's given to everyone. Now, the first of the 10 Commandments is said in the singular. I am the Lord your God that took you out of Egypt. It doesn't say I took all of yous in the plural the Hebrew would have. So the Or HaChaim, though, says, why was it given? It's a mystical approach based on earlier Kabbalistic thought. Or HaChaim lived in the 1700s. He was same time as Baal Shem Tov. They never met. It is said if they would have met, he was in Israel. If they would have met, the Mashiach would have come. Their two souls would have brought down the Mashiach. But either way, he says a teaching like this. Every individual is commanded to do the commandments as individual, but the merit reverberates to the collective. We are not in this alone. In a positive sense, it says love your neighbor as yourself, and Kabbalistically we explain because you are part of one soul. We just happen to be in different bodies, but we are one root soul. And the Talmud, Jerusalem Talmud says, if your hand slips and you cut your hand by accident, you don't take revenge by cutting your other hand. Why? Because you're one body. The truth is we are one body. We're one entity. And spiritually we are as well. So what is that? What are the ramifications? That when you do something good, it benefits your fellow spiritually. And when he does or she does something good, it benefits you. Why? We are one entity, spiritual and physical. So he says here, God has commanded us, the 613, and no one person is able to keep them all. Why? Some are for kings, some are for Kohanim, some are just for women, some are just for Levium. So how do we all keep them? But we're part of a collective. We're part of one soul. When you keep one mitzvah, it brings benefit to the rest of the community. In a similar fashion, each one of us create the entire body of the Jewish people. So we are individuals, the first approach. Second approach is we are one individual made up of many fragments in many bodies, but our core soul is one. So he says that how do we fulfill all the commandments? We do it together. The entire Jewish people get the Torah together because we are one. As a matter of fact, we can't keep many of the commandments of the temple. There are 87 positive commandments we can do today, which is the numeric value of the Hebrew word for fine gold, paz. We read that in our Shabbat prayers. But there are 87 out of 248. But we are one in the chain of history. The Jewish people, it says at Mount Sinai, not just the Jews who were there, but there were also Jews who weren't there were there, which means the Jews are yet to be born. The converts yet to be converted are all at Sinai. Why? We're in this together as a collective. We may be split into different time zones and maybe even different epochs, but we are one, connected through time, this mystical body of the Jewish people. Okay, we have here Aristotle, a famous quote of Aristotle that Maimonides takes and gives it a Jewish twist. When you first read Maimonides' Guide for Perplexed, many times it seems to us as if he is just quoting Aristotle or another Greek thinker. But even those times, much of the time, he gives it a little bit of a Jewish twist where he takes it and gives it a different light. So what we have here is, he says, it's evident that the state is a creation of nature and that a human being by nature is a political animal. So he says here, I'm just gonna make it a little bigger, and he who by nature, not by mere accident, is without a state, is either above humanity or below it. You're either a beast or a god. Because he says here, the state by nature is clearly prior to the family and the individual, since the whole is of necessity prior to the part. For example, if the whole body be destroyed, there'd be no foot or hand. So the society is the whole, And therefore you need the society, and the individual comes second. And if you're a person that can live without a society, or you have no need because you're self-sufficient, you're either an animal or a god, you're not part of the state. So this is Aristotle. The state is necessary, and therefore it takes priority. So here the Rambam takes it and moves it a little bit. He says like this, the Rambam says, the first perfection consists in being healthy and the very best bodily state as an individual. And it's always possible to finding the things necessary for him wherever he seeks them, such as food and all the other things you need for the governance of the body, shelter, bathing, so health, cleanliness, those things the Rambam sees as imperative in the pyramid of needs. And he says you can't achieve it by one isolated individual. For an individual can only attain all this through a political association, it being already known that man is political by nature. The Rambam makes it more of a means to an end and lowers the hierarchy, although he says humanity is civilized and needs civilization and needs society. That's Maimonides in his Guide for the Perplexed. Now, I don't want to make the Rambam unidimensional. There's a multiplicity, but there are others that will express the dichotomy that we started with in more clear ways. So the Rambam is taking the Jewish view that society is necessary for the individual. It's very important, as we're going to see. So here we have Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik has different essays on the individual and society. I just want to read an excerpt from one here. Judaism has always viewed man from this dual perspective, both as an independent individual and part of the community. We are a limb of the body of Israel. And there's a constant conversation about this. Does the individual stand above the community, which should serve its needs, or should the individuals make himself subordinate to the community's needs? So in Judaism, this question has been asked in relation to the individual who serves as the community leader. Who is the greatest of all? Moses, Redeemer of Israel, teacher of Torah. As a matter of fact, it says in the Torah, he says a few weeks ago, the I am found among 600,000 foot soldiers of the Jewish people. And the Talmud says he's equal to all 600,000. As a matter of fact, as the Midrash, when it's talking about the incredible fruitful rate of reproduction of the Jews in Egypt, there's one Midrash that says they gave birth to 6 at a time. Another Midrash says they gave birth, what 6? 600,000. So that's how they multiply. 600,000 at once? That's absurd. No, Moses' mother had one baby called Moses. She had 2 other kids, but Moses is equal to all the Jews. In other words, they took this idea of being fruitful, multiply, and see Moses being the equivalent of all the Jews. But what do we say about Moses? We say about Moshe that after the sin of the golden calf, when the Jews sin, he says, God says to Moshe, go down. Go down. Doesn't say go down from the mountain. It says go down. So Thomas says, what do you mean go down? It says lower yourself. You have lost your stature. You think I gave you greatness for yourself? Greatness is for you. It's for the Jewish people. And now Israel sin. I don't need you. You're meaningless. That's a bit strong language. What need have I for you? Of course, Moshe steps up into the fray as well and saves the Jewish people. And he understands that his identity is given over to the existence of the Jew. That's a true leader. But Rabbi Soloveitchik is pointing out that even the greatness of an individual like Moshe seems to be dependent on the community. There's a balance with each other, and they're interdependent. Sometimes we find that the community has to sacrifice itself on behalf of the individual, and at times the individual has to sacrifice himself for the good of the community. We're not letting go of both heads. We're holding on to both values, even though at times they could seem to contradict. It says, never is the individual worth belittled when measured against the community, and never is the community undermined because of any individual or individuals. Each has his own position of strength. And in Jewish law, he's referring to, for example, if enemies come to a city and say, give us one of your Jews, we want to kill one of them as an example, or we're going to wipe you all out. You have no right to give over any innocent person, because one is equal to the whole world. If you want, you can sacrifice your own life and volunteer, and Jews have done that. Sadly, there's been more than enough opportunities of that sort of tragedy to happen. But the point is, the community can't say, okay, we're going to make a raffle, we're going to make a go-roll, and whoever gets, better that the Greeks or Romans should kill one and not all of us. No, we don't say that. So he's discussing in Jewish law as well. So, we have Rousseau, and then we're going to have also, who else is coming up next? Coming up next is Mill. And the elements are like this. This leads to the individualism above everything. That, in other words, our natural state is to be individual, and we need help. So we need to be able to find a form of association which can defend and protect with a whole common force, each individual and their goods. And this is a social contract we talk about. And either subconscious or not, we're all part of it. It's a choice we make, but it's all about our individual liberty. And this is even more pronounced when we see Mill. He says here, the principle of the whole soul and mankind are warranted individually collectively is interfering with the liberty of action of any of their number of self-protection. So the only power that a society and a state can have is to prevent harm to others. You can't compel the individual to anything because you think it's better for him. It's not your right. The state has no right. He says to justify compulsion towards the bottom, the conduct from which it is desired to deter must be calculated because evil to someone else. In other words, only if he's going to hurt someone else. Your right to swing your fist stops where my nose begins. And society is here to protect my nose. But over himself, his own body, his own mind, the individual is sovereign. Wouldn't agree necessarily with all the zoning laws that we have here. But he doesn't say property here. But to take it further, this is the idea, though, that the individual is choosing to enter into a bond, whether it's a social contract or even the rights of the state is very limited. Only limited that you shouldn't, but anything I do with myself, stay away from me. What you think is good for me is not your business. There's not high wisdom here, is the argument. But this leads us in Hegel, where we have the Prussian state is seen as a value in its own, and it becomes something greater. There's a mystical thought that the state is the collective of everyone. He says here, the individual's destiny is living of a universal life through the state, which may or may not be what allows both the communists and the fascists to develop. Here's a fascist. I don't know if I should have put this in, but I put it in. I didn't take Yamach Shemo. I took Mussolini over here. But he says here, in the fascist conception of history, man is man only by virtue of the spiritual process to which he contributes as a member of the family, the social group, the nation, and in function of history, which all nations bring their contribution. So he says here, fascism is opposed to all individualistic abstractions based on 18th century materialism. He says, the fascist conception of the state is all-embracing. Outside of it, no human or spiritual values can exist, much less have value. All right, so I put the fascists up here, but the same is true on the other end of the spectrum for the communists, that the state becomes, or the collective of everyone becomes the value. And you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. We don't need quotes. We all know this. So I want to open up for any questions before we go further. Any thoughts before we go further? Okay. One of the great experiments that socialists love, that is the kibbutz. The kibbutz was an amazing experiment. And it began to fragment late 60s, 70s, 80s, the challenges. But here's a letter that the Rebbe wrote to the Speaker of the Knesset, who had written a book about the kibbutz. He's one of the founders of the kibbutz and the kibbutz movement, very active. He wrote a history about it. His name was Kaddish Lud. His original Polish name was Luzaninsky or something, but Luz is the bone that the Midrash says the Jewish people be rebuilt from. So the Luz bone is an important element. But going back for a second, here he sent the Rebbe his book, and the Rebbe gives his critique of the kibbutz movement and a positive way that it can be structured. There's a story told of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe that he was on a train once, and the intellectual, every Jew is an intellectual, and every Jew is an intellectual. I remember speaking to my brother once when he was teaching in West Hartford. He was a rabbi there for many years. And I said, what's the caliber of your students? He said, let me tell you, my plumbers are intellectual. He said, the Jews are thinkers. It doesn't matter what they do for a living. It's all good. But the point is, they're all sitting in the middle of this before the Russian Revolution, or in the midst, and they're discussing the values of communism, socialism, Buddhism, fascism, whatever it was. Every ism they're discussing. And then one turns to the Rebbe who's in the train car and says, Rebbe, which one is closer to Judaism? Rebbe says, each one has an element, the spark of the divine. And you have to be able to free that spark and find that element. There's an element of truth in each of these political systems. God is not a Democrat, and he's not a Republican. He's not independent. These forms don't fit. God's will is the Torah. And it has elements of these different things. So it's interesting, you find different letters of the Rebbe where he spoke about how the kibbutz socialism is not the antithesis. Even communism, communal living of an individual group who chooses to live collectively, that's what I'm talking about, can be made holy. As a matter of fact, I don't know if the Rebbe brings this down or not, but in Sfat, in the early Kabbalistic period of the 1500s, the revival of the Arizal and Ramosha Cordovero, there were groups of these mystics that lived in a communal living where each one took care of each other. And they took care of each other's bread, and they studied, they meditated. It can be done. There are limits, which we're going to get to. And even among the early Hasidic brotherhood, they used to say, my bread is yours. But they would say it that yours even before theirs. In other words, I'm going to share with you my bread, I'm going to share it with you and with me. In other words, the other even came first. It can exist, but there are dangers. So this man sends a book to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe doesn't hold back. And the Rebbe is always gracious in his letters, but he doesn't miss an opportunity to point out where the kibbutz movement should go. And this is 1964. The elements the Rebbe points out can be looked in the rear view mirror now with the imploding in the 90s and the 80s and this middle set of 70s of much of the elements of the kibbutz, what it led to and why it fragmented, where the Rebbe was giving to the stalwarts and the believers of the kibbutz, who they saw themselves as the foundation of the state. And they were. The labor movement, all that, the kibbutzniks were originally the most dedicated warriors, most dedicated. But something happened. And you see here the Rebbe with his analysis before it fell apart. Before, this is at the height still. Maybe others, I haven't investigated enough with other sociologists were already predicting. But from what I've read, I don't think so. Okay, here goes the Rebbe. This is in 1964. The Rebbe is writing a letter in the days of Slichos, in between Rosh Hashanah, before Rosh Hashanah. This is a time of great introspection. The Rebbe did not have time to meet with people and deal with mundane things. He must have felt this was very important. Writing to the secular author of a book on the kibbutz movement in Israel. Blessing and greetings. Shalom uvracha. When receiving a book from an author, it's my custom to presume that he did not send it for no particular reason, but rather his intention was I read it. And if I have anything to remark, accept my remarks in good cheer, even if I do not identify with his views. So too in the case of your book, I will allow myself to express a number of remarks, particularly regarding the primary focus of your book, to describe the commune, the kibbutz, and the communal life there. I trust that you will agree with me that the creation of a community is not an end in itself, a given, and certainly not an ultimate end. Rather, it is a means to the achievement through a collective effort of a desirable way of life. We don't worship the state. The state is an idol, if you put it up as the ultimate value, fashion. So it's a means to an end, clearly. What is that means to an end? He says here like this, in and of itself, the most apparent function of the commune is to equalize individuals of greater or lesser stature, something which runs contrary to human nature. For the human beings, we say, just as their faces are different from one another, so too are their minds and characteristics different, characters different from one another. We are different. Remember we spoke about how God makes us in the press, and we're all different, not just our face, klaster panav, but deyastein are not shavos. Our ideas, our characteristics, our character trait, our way of looking at the world. And as an aside, just like I don't get angry at Pinchas that he doesn't look like me, why should I get angry with him because he doesn't think like me? If I had a bunch of clones running around looking like me, it would not be an appealing world. Not just that, that's not what it's about. As a matter of fact, I know people get upset if someone's wearing the same clothing as them. Everyone wants their individuality. I was at a wedding where someone made a mistake of wearing white and she wasn't the bride. That wasn't fun to watch. The point is that the fact that we think different from one another, it's intrinsic to the human condition. To try to erase that is to erase the human condition. And we see this as a value. Both, I would just say Kabbalistically, the infinite God creates a fragmented universe. And our job is to show how all the fragmented universe is one with the divine. So too, each individual is a reflection of the divine. The entire sun can be reflected in a little drop of water. Each one of us is a reflection of the divine, but we're different. It's when the difference and the things come together, this is mystically, Rebbe's not talking yet mystically, we are then an expression of the infinite. But the idea that we are different is intrinsic to the human condition. So here's the problem. And the Rebbe grew up under the experience of communism. So the Rebbe knew a person finds satisfaction and fulfillment when he's given the opportunity to actualize his potentials, not so much in those areas which he shares in common with his fellows, but rather those areas which he as an individual is superior to his compatriots and his society. And in these areas lies his uniqueness. What are you good at? How are you different? Oh, I could walk like everybody else. That's not so appealing. Oh, I run faster than most people in my class, in my grade, in my school, in my town, in my city, in the world. Wow. This is people want to express themselves. There's a desire and it's natural. Don't crush that. At the same time, here's the contradiction. Man is not by nature a recluse. And we say the first beginning of creation, when God makes it a mate for him, it's not good for the human being to be alone. The human being seeks the social life as the context and means by which to attain his personal fulfillment. It's a means to an end, not just as Rousseau and Mill would say, to protect yourself. There's a little bit more there. There's an ability of a society to do more than just protect us. But it still is, for my individual personal fulfillment, why it has a value. Indeed, a communal life enables a group of individuals to achieve far more than they could on their own, more even than the sum of the individual potential. We know, as an aside, we read about when they carry the fruits from the land of Israel, that two of the people are carrying a load that 4 people could carry. And we see already in the Torah that when 2 people lift up an object together, it's the human condition, have the ability to lift up that much more. So when we come together, we could do more than the sum of our individual potential. So it's known that the output of 2 people is more than double the output of 1 person working on his own. Another positive function of the commune of the kibbutz is that it eliminates jealousy and competitiveness. This is messianic. The kibbutz, and I want to say socialism, can have a messianic element. because that breaks down jealousy, competitive can break down between a person and his fellow. And a communal effort, if you join together, draw people closer to each other. One of the ways that the kibbutz fell apart, part of it was raising the children, as we're going to see, but even individual possession. Women didn't want to be wearing the same clothing other women were wearing. We're washing and sharing together. No, I want to have my own dress. That was the beginning. And then why shouldn't I have my own dishwasher? What dishwasher is that? My own things. Why the communal? Once we have individualism, but if you're sharing a common goal and you're a communal effort, we're all in this together. It draws people together usually. In other words, when there's conflict, if you have to put your finger in the dike and hold back the flood, and everybody's working to keep the waters from flooding, there's a communal effort. You see, when the Babylon laid siege to Israel, we say this was the potential for everyone to be united. And this is in the period that we're going to be entering soon. But even in 1948 or any other period in our modern history in Israel, you see when it comes to getting Jews out of Russia or airlifting them, the Jewish community comes together and the things that separate us fall apart. A communal effort has that impact. So on the other hand, the purpose of the kibbutz, of the commune, must not be to eliminate all competitiveness, because challenge and competition are among the chief stimulants towards greater effort and advancement on a person's part and an optimal and zealous utilization of his talents and potential. Rather, the commune should channel the competition to a higher place. In other words, instead of the competition being for man's most basic material needs, which is where the competition begins in individualistic society. Everyone wants the means to an end. Everyone wants their physical material needs. To the extent that in a materialistic, uber-capitalistic society, in the words of our sages, were it not for the fear of government, society's enforcement of its laws, a man would swallow his fellow lives. In other words, the challenge of individualistic society is that you need laws. You have to be able to have some sort of way to keep people from polluting, because if it's all about my own good and I don't care about anybody else, so let everyone else suffer. So we end up with structures of enforcement. We need police, we need judges. But in a communal society, the competition that does exist and should not be crushed can be transferred to higher aims, whether on a very simple level to be able to get the supplements beyond one's basic needs, or on a higher level to achievement in the life of the spirit. What may be derived from all the above is that the concept of community and communal life is not a goal and achievement in its own right, but it's a step. It's a facilitator and a path to the development of the individuality and uniqueness of its members, and the realization of the individuality and uniqueness in the best and fullest way. Not that everyone should be a farmer. Not that everyone should be equal by acting the same. You know, I remember reading a short story, I forgot who wrote it, but in the quest for equality, the dancer, the ballet, the dancer is weighed down with weights. The beautiful person has masks put on their faces to disfigure them. The musically inclined are put sounds on them so they're not able to, or on their fingers, they can't play the instrument. The wise people have speakers going into the ears, so they're all disjointed and they're all not able to think. We're making everybody equal is not by the lowest common denominator. And part of the challenge that can exist in communal living is that you end up, everyone is equal in the sense of everyone doing the same jobs. Now, what you have to allow people to flourish as individuals with a shared goal. And this comes down to the Rebbe's point. Two main elements. So what is the purpose? So such a basic appreciation of the function and goals of the kibbutz, of the commune, is important not only after the commune has been established and a full communal life is set up and running, when it was now must be decided how to utilize the surplus resources and how to emphasize each member's characteristics and talents to the fullest extent. Rather, appreciation of utmost importance at the very beginning of the commune's establishment. And I would say, as an aside, these people are coming from socialist backgrounds who made the kibbutz. Russia didn't work out for them. The anti-Semitism of Russia continuously made Jewish idealists of Marxism and socialism and communism, all these different approaches, made them lose faith in the system or lose their life. And if they escaped, sometimes they still took the faith in socialism with them. But the Rebbe is saying, one second, it's not enough to have the faith in the idea of communal living. You have to know the why before you make the commune. If you wake up midstream, after it's been established, first you need survival. In the beginning, the kibbutz allowed people to live. Everyone worked together and they took care of themselves. So for survival, yeah, you put your finger in the dike. Yes, you're keeping back a war. Everyone pitches in. Yes, you can all be part of it, save the Russian Jews, bring them to Israel. But one second, this unity that is based on survival, on an element, once that survival is over, so then what are you doing living together like this? The Rebbe says like this. He says it's not that once it's up and running. Rather, this appreciation, almost important very beginning of the communist establishment. The why. What is the purpose? So often, perhaps in most cases, the very establishing of a communally structured life will by necessity provoke an internal resistance on the part of its members. This is a challenge of making a kibbutz to a regimen that attempts to suppress their individuality and turn into parts of a mass. If you wanted to be popular among people that weren't raised red diaper babies, you have to ask yourself, why should they suppress their individuality? However, when the individual member appreciates this is but a stage in a self-development and a path toward the expansion of its opportunities for greater achievement as an individual, by freeing him from lesser concerns, his basic material needs. Some people are going to be the farmers, which will be procured more easily and more efficiently thanks to the collective communal effort. This appreciation will not only eliminate his natural resistance, will increase his enthusiasm and commitment in the fulfillment of his duties towards the commune. The Rebbe is not saying tear it down. The Rebbe is saying figure out what is it that you want to accomplish with it. Unity for the sake of unity doesn't work to erase individuals' right. Everyone be with me. Everyone follow me. Why? Because you want unity. Wait, why am I giving up my individuality? I want to keep my individuality. Okay, so now here goes the one of the challenges here was the younger generation. Furthermore, such understanding and appreciation is important not only for the success of the commune, but also the quality of life within it. An issue which you also touch upon in your book. For example, the quality of the relationship between parents and their children in the kibbutz, an area which the damage can far exceed the gains. For these individuals belonging to the spiritual area of life where a person's individuality and independence are paramount importance. For children were scarred, some loved it, were scarred by being raised as infants together. All the kids were put together in these rooms. This is already they're older, but infants, you see this. And again, it changed, it evolved because of some of the negative, but a lot of things evolve. But to understand how important it is, not just as infants, Rebbe is saying as young people. Why? Another point he says is a difference in feeling in regard to the kibbutz on the part of its founders versus to the part of those born into it. The people who found it, or those who joined the early stages, can derive a deep satisfaction from the fact they have come to this, as you describe in your book, from a different way of life, from a society with very different views, and have achieved this communal life through great toil, sacrifice, and suffering. The Jews weren't farmers in Europe. Very few were. And in Eastern Europe, they weren't, land. Here they come and they work, avodas adama, they're working the ground and they're reclaiming the land of Israel. They are driven by a sense of mission. So they feel great. Always sure to make one's achievement that much more precious. If you're suffering and toil, you're going to feel good about it. And admirable, worth emulating in one's own eyes. That's the early generation. However, on the other hand, those born into the commune were raised in it and regarded as the most natural way of life. They were born to that. To them, the limitations of communal life, such as discussed above, tend to be more pronounced in its positive aspect. They're chafing at the bit And when they go out in the street and they see people riding a bike, and we only have one old bike to share because the kibbutz secretariat, when they got together, they couldn't vote on every kid getting a new bike. That wasn't a priority. That was capitalist luxury or whatever it was. They're chasing at the bit, not just of the material things, a much deeper problem. They don't understand the why. He said, because all they're seeing is what they can't do. This cannot fail to awaken in them a dissatisfaction or even rebelliousness. It's inevitable that there will be dissent between them and those who enforce the communal regimen on them. Regarding them, it is even more important to emphasize the communal life as a stage and facilitator towards a higher goal. Which brings me to the crux of the matter, to the burning question, which incidentally I did not see addressed in your book. What goal or ideal is presented to the next generation as the objective to be achieved via the structure of a communal life? So they should desire to achieve it, even if it's required effort, toil, and sacrifice on their part. This is why you can live in a post-kibbutz or even a post-Zionist world if people don't have a feeling of why am I in this. The Rebbe, as you see, doesn't push Yiddishkeit on him. The Rebbe first said purpose, meaning. Of course, the Rebbe's belief is Torah. But the first question is, the Jew has to look for meaning, not just to perpetuate the power structures and the communal structures that exist because I sacrifice for it. You sacrifice for it. I don't value it. What are you going to do? Okay, so this idea, though, that the community is for a purpose, and this exists for the state as a whole as well. It serves the individual. And this is so important when we describe Moshe as being the proper leader of the Jewish people. Let's see how much time we have. It is based on the premise that he worries about a little sheep. He worries about a little individual because the individual is the whole. That is the whole. There's not a differentiation, so to speak, when it comes to value. And the community is here to serve the individual. You know, institutions like schools that think they have an identity of their own, and the leadership of the school will then do whatever it can to survive, not thinking about the school is here for the student. It's an expression of that. The school is not here just for self-survival. The school is here to be able to take care of the kids. If you've lost that vision and you want to make sure that your institution has a great reputation and you're going to hide whether abuse or lack of good teaching or whatever it may be because of your institution, you've made an idol out of stones and wood. In other words, buildings, the edifice complex was this idea of worship of structure, of even of social structure. Why? This is the question. There has to be a why to it. It's not arbitrary. If it is, it doesn't have that same sort of motivation to make people work together. When people come together with common cause, so there's a value in society, which leads, and this for us, is an appreciation of what it means to be individual in a collective of the Jewish people or of any collective. What is the role, so to speak? It's not about just furthering the good of the state. It's rather creating an atmosphere where every individual can thrive. Okay, which leads us to another letter of the Rebbe, a short letter. And this was really the structure of the class originally. All this I added right before, but the issue of being a refugee, when you are separated from your family, from your community, from your structure, when you are like, the imagery in Judaism and the Tehillim of, a tree firmly rooted with water nourishing its roots and shade providing for those who come by. This idea of being established is the ultimate, each man under his fig tree, under his vine. This is the messianic vision of being home. When we are in the state of exile and dispersion, and even more so when we're in a state of fleeing and not even finding permanent roots there, a person can feel totally disconnected from the values of the group and the values of the collective. Seemingly, it's a disaster, an unparalleled disaster. And I would say, in some way, we're all refugees right now. I don't want to overextend it. we're living in gilded cages. We all have our place to be, but the point that we're displaced, that's why it has unique, resonates in a unique way with us right now. So here's a letter from the Rebbe. So 3rd of Hanukkah, 5705, this is 1944. 3 years earlier, the Rebbe had been in France. He said, the Rebbe says, your letter awakened memories of the time when we were together in Vichy and Nice, each of us under living conditions to which they were unaccustomed. When a person is uprooted from their habitual environment, until such time they become accustomed to the new conditions and requirements, there come to light certain traits of their inner character as they are in their purity, undistorted by the expectations of society. Society clouds. Society, by virtue of us being part of something larger, we do lose, without even an ideal society, we lose some elements of individuality because we do subjugate them to the higher good to some degree at any different point. That's what a society means. When you're outside of that, the Rebbe is saying a positive element of being a refugee. Rebbe says it comes to light, I'm repeating it just because it's pretty short, certain traits of the inner character as they are in their purity, undistorted by the expectations of society. Often these traits reveal hidden virtues of the person, virtues that have been hidden even from themselves, under the layers of manners and social convention. We behave in a certain way. The Hasidic approach was we're looking at the forehead of the other, and then we follow them like geese waddling through life. You know, we're societal creatures, but part of it is conformity. Everyone conforms to something. I remember, someone telling me, I was visiting a college campus, and they were telling me, why do you guys all dress the same? And I pointed to my friends, compared to you guys, we're all dressed different. Every one of you is wearing a white shirt and a blue jeans. Every one of you, look around, everyone, now it's different. But the point is that societal, we unconsciously or consciously, there are elements where even the external becomes changed, how much more so it covers up on the individual. He says here, in such cases, fortunate is the person who does not allow these traits to disappear when they subsequently settle down and find tranquility. To uncover your inner power and your inner essence that has been undiluted and untouched, but you have not allowed to reach to fruition, paradoxically, when society is removed, or rather, you are removed from society into a new culture where you're not able to put down those same roots and have the same comfort level, at times individual things come to the fore. The challenge for us is, how do we use them later on? So I want to share with you a story of the Rebbe himself, 2 stories. But first we'll conclude this part. I think we have 5 more minutes. I can share it. Okay. So here's a famous quote everyone knows: no person is an island, every person is a piece of a continent. So we find a similar theme, and here it is in a little bit more Kabbalistic language. Each one of us is a letter in the Torah. And the letter of the Torah, and this is one of the ideas, the Rebbe had a campaign that each one of us should buy letters in communal Torahs. We become united through the Torah. So far there's been, I think, 13 Torahs, each with 300,000 letters written, maybe more, because these were for the children, I think. But either way, there are communal Torahs with everyone buying a letter in the Torah. Why is that so symbolic in Jewish thought? A letter on its own has no meaning. A word in Hebrew is minimum two letters to be called writing in Hebrew. Yet when letters are joined to others, they make a word. Words combined with others make a sentence. Sentences make a paragraph. And paragraphs joined to make a story. The Baal Shem Tov taught that every Jew is a letter, every family is a word, every community is a sentence. And the Jewish people at any one time are a paragraph. And of course, in history, we're the book, through the book. So the idea that we are both, this is a little bit not, I want to take it back. In a way, each one of us is a whole Torah scroll as well. We are truly a letter in the collective soul, but we're also an entire Torah scroll. So another share, just the Rebbe himself, 2 stories. The Rebbe himself was in France, and for a while he was in Marseille. He had to get papers. They left from Portugal ultimately. That's how they were able to leave. One of the last boats to get out. But while he was there, this man tells a story. His name is David Newman. David Newman says when he was in this, there was like an orphanage, kids that had been left or lost their parents, or in this period, they were living communal life in a home, and there weren't enough people to take care of them. Many of the kids were sad, missing their parents, not enough food there. And he says a man started showing up, and they didn't know his name. They called him Mr. And he would bring them food. He would tell them stories. And he remembered how the kids loved being, and with him he would teach them about Judaism and bring food. And this went on for a while until it became more stabilized, and the man left. Years later, the man went because someone in the family was getting married. I believe he went to an audience with the Rebbe. He's now 40 years old, 30 years old, I think 40. And the Rebbe sees him, and the Rebbe says, Davidol. He looks at him, who is this? He goes, oh, that's Monsieur, that's the man in the middle of Vichy, France, occupied, is busy bringing food. And he recognized me. So the Rebbe was was an introvert. He studied, that's what his life was. In France, because of crisis, and other times in his life earlier too, but you see it very clearly, one could argue that elements of communal responsibility came to the fore because of necessity. And he saw it in his father's home. His mother was a great activist, and he as a child also helped out. But here, it became something different. As a matter of fact, the Rebbitzin told the story that when there was a period where the government, they didn't want refugees staying in Paris. So in order to prove that you could stay in a hotel, you had to show you had $100. So the Rebbe got a $100 bill, and he would stand near the hotels and go in the marketplace and find people, Jews, and say, here, go get yourself a hotel room. Here's the $100. They would go to the hotel, show they had 100, get a room, and they would come back and give the Rebbe the 100. The Rebbe would recycle the 100 and get other refugees room to stay in these hotels. The Rebbe made this activity to help these people find a home where they wouldn't have been able to stay in Paris. And then, so there were stories like that. And then here's another story. Let me find it. Let's see if I'm going to find it. Nope, that's not the right one. Hold on. Here it is. Sorry.
On October 3rd, 1940, coinciding with Rosh Hashanah, the Vichy government passed the statute.
1 second here, 10 seconds, and then we'll be able to do it. Okay, one more time, a short 3-minute video we'll conclude with. Here it is.
In 1940, coinciding with Rosh Hashanah, the Vichy government passed the Statut des Juifs, Law of the Jews, excluding them from the armed forces and removing them from their professional positions, declaring them the underclass. The proud 2,000-year history of the Jews of France, home of the revered Rashi and the Tosafists, was swinging into one of its lowest periods, reminiscent of the blood libels and crusades of 1,000 years prior. Rabbi Menachem Tachtel was 18 years old in 1940. He fled Belgium and wandered from city to city in southern France.
אחד הגזירות שממשלת וישי, שהייתה ממשלת בובות של הנאצים, היה להיפקד. כל יהודי היה צריך להיפקד, שמו, כתובתו, כדי בבוא הזמן הם יוכלו ללכוד אותו. ועד היום יש לי עדיין את התלוש שאני נפקדתי בתור יהודי במרסיי בתאריך זה וזה. הרבי היה במלון ובאו הפוקדים, השוטרים, לפקוד ולרשום את היהודים. שאלו את הרבנית חיים מושקה עליה שלום, הדת? היא ענתה אורתודוקסית. המילה אורתודוקסית היא דו-משמעית. אורתודוקסי, דת יוונית אורתודוקסית, וגם כן יהודי שומר תורה ומצוות חרדי גם אורתודוקסית. אז הם הבינו שדת יוונית אורתודוקסית. כשרבי בא הביתה, בא למלון, היא סיפרה דברים כהווייתן. הוא אמר, מה? אינני רוצה להינתק מהקדוש ברוך הוא, אפילו על הנייר. הוא ניגש למשטרה ואמר, אני יהודי אורתודוקסי. זה שמענו עוד בהיותנו באזור וישי. היום לא יכולים להבין, אבל זה היה ממש סיכון גדול מאוד. זו הייתה הכנה להקל על מנחתם של הנאצים, לתפוס, ללכוד את היהודים ולשלוח אותם אי שם.
Order the early years today at gemstore.com.
All right, let me make sure I shut that down. All right, so I just want to conclude here. Let's see if I have it here. Oh, all right. So to conclude, to pull it all together, so here that example though, again, anytime there's self-sacrifice, that also reveals an inner element of a person's personality when you're put under pressure about your religion and about what you value. But even in the earlier story, just the Rebbe was focusing on the positive, purely in the positive in his letter. He's saying when you are disconnected different from community, different elements of your personality that have not been allowed to flourish can be revealed, and different talents and sensitivities and values. And lucky is the one who's able to keep it afterwards, and you don't slip back into the mundane. In other words, each one of us have been able in some way, different things have come to the fore. They can be slight things. The trick is to be able to define them and save them for later, to be able to use them later as well, whether it's taking a step back, whether it's davening, thinking, and family appreciation. There are many things, each one different. But going back to the refugee analogy, to me it's fascinating. There were many things they suffered together there in France. But the idea that, okay, looking back, what was that moment of spiritual growth that I could take with me and use later? And then the other theme, just to close our circle, would be the theme of individual, not versus society, but as being this integral part of a way for the individual to have community. It's integral for the individual to have the community. We're not running away. We don't want to run away from community. On the other hand, we have to recognize that we are a community, each one of us. There's a famous story of one of the Hasidic Rebbes where his uncle, when he's a child, he asked him, do you daven with a minyan? So he said, yeah, I daven with a minyan. I daven with a quorum. And then he saw him praying alone. He said, well, you told me you pray with a minyan. Because I do. I pray with a quorum of my 10 attributes of my emotions, my intellect. Kabbalistically, the mind is 3 and the emotions are 7. I pray with all of them. In other words, the idea that each one of us is a Torah scroll. Each one is a community, what makes up a community. We have to unite ourselves. And that leads to uniting of, the family and the community beyond, the neighborhood and the world as a whole. But that idea to be able to recognize the value of society and what society should be, helping each one reach their ultimate fulfillment as individual. It's not about crushing the individual. It's about the opportunities that have to be given to the individual. Is not that they should be cookie cutters, but that they should be the best they can be. And the Rebbe was giving a roadmap that could have saved the kibbutz movement. The Rebbe wasn't, you have to be like this and live in Brooklyn. No, the kibbutz can also work, but you have to have a purpose. And this is, part of the rethinking of the kibbutz as well. All right, so I think this is also that idea of not being competitive, so to speak, about ideologies, that to find the good in each ideology and how it can be better. So here the Rebbe gone to the crux of the beauty of communal life, of a communal living, but there's something there that needs an important ingredient that's integral.